Um, our community has been selected, Los Alamos National Labs, to develop 8 more warhead pits, as they call it, the trigger mechanism that goes into the nuclear bomb. Um, and so our community has just been picked to continue to be able to do that. I always say that New Mexico was the well-kept secret, and didn't realize why I would go around the country always saying that, was because in the Southwest, they were saving us for the big one. Many of our communities, as Dylan has shared with you, we have the whole cycle of the production and disposal of much of this waste in New Mexico. And we have one facility where Dr. McLean, as she was expressing, that much of their waste comes to what we call the WHIP area, the WHIP site, which is the waste isolation pilot plant, where all the nuclear waste goes. They call it mixed waste, but we're finding out now that high-level waste is what's going to our communities. And so that many of these facilities where they produce or develop, much of this waste is going to our communities now. You ask yourself why in a community that is so small, how they could place such a facility in a community like that. But we ask ourselves that because one of the things that we learn is that when you don't have the knowledge or you don't have the power to affect change, much of these companies take advantage of that. And that's exactly what this government did to our community. It took advantage of our community by placing many of these facilities in New Mexico. We have open pit mines. It kind of like you kind of start getting emotional up here because you start thinking about all of these things. You want to say them all at one time, but you don't have the time to be able to do that. So I just wanted to share with you that many of the things that are going on in our community has to, as we look at climate change and what climate change means for us, what does it really mean for us? And I think one of the beauties about that we're talking about is that we do have alternatives, but I want to speak about that a little later on. Right now, what I'd like to kind of express to you is the devastations that many of these companies have on our communities. And one of the things is that, Miguel, which is going to be speaking next, is I want him to share, because there was a big article that was put out by the New York Times here. And it talks about our community, and not the best part of our community, but the more ugly part of our community, we would say. But I think it's important for us to see the connections of all of this that these companies do in our communities, and the things that we're promised in jobs, jobs that never come, and those kind of things, and what it really means to our young people. So, I want to kind of turn some of that over to Miguel and let him share a little bit with you. I just want to say that when I said that Los Alamos has been given millions and billions of dollars to do a lot of research right now. And much of that research is going to be focused on the development of nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. So you can take your choice. Which one you think was going to benefit us more. But, I want to kind of turn this over now to Miguel and then wrap that up a little bit. I would like to wrap that up.
I think a lot of people see this type of work that we do as being political work. And for me, I'm someone who, I despise politics. For me, this work is never about politics. I think politics is a tool that we have to use, but ultimately this work is about our values and it's about our communities. And when we talk about our communities, what we're talking about is our families. And I think when we talk about our families, ultimately what we're talking about is the youth in our communities, as our young people. And I think in our society, we oftentimes have a tendency to think that our youth is not capable of leading their own struggle. That even when we have youth programs, that they're only the participants in the programs and not the leaders who are setting the priorities and really making the organization run. And I think the next speaker, Miguel Moreno, who's a young leader with the Product of Aztlan in New Mexico, is going to shatter some of those stereotypes.
I'd just like to start off this morning saying thank you guys for joining our workshop and listening to us babble on about all the crazy stuff that happens in our communities and just in general our life. I want to take a minute to thank PDF and the Flying Eagle Women Fund for having us here, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you to my grandfather and my grandmother, for joining me here for my second year here at UN. And I guess I can just jump right into it and talking about the work that I do as a community organizer, a youth organizer in my community. I come from Chimayo, New Mexico. The county is Rio Arriba County, Upper Santa Fe County. We have the highest rate of teen pregnancies and teen suicides, per capita, over, Mississippi and a few other of the southern states, but in general we are the heroin capital of the world per capita. We have a national rate of 19 deaths a year, and this year the New York Times did a national news article, front page New York Times, on our drastic increase of heroin overdoses. This year it's the fourth month, April, and we have 26 overdoses that we've already encountered. 14 of which have been youth under the age of 23. And these are just the problems that we have to face in our community, dealing with the effects of our climate change, and the effects that we have, that climate change has on our community really isn't any, because we don't have the time to focus in on, global warming and, all this other political, bullshit, excuse me for using, the normal terminology that I would use to anybody, but it's just, it doesn't have that kind of effect. We just don't grasp it. It's not a tangible subject that could be used as an organizing tool in our communities. We have more things to worry about, like our kids. I'm a father. I have a 7-month-old son, and there's a lot more things that we have to worry about, like paying bills, and cleaning up our streets and worrying about, the needle exchange. Some people say, the needle exchange is it's a source of, I think it's a source of suppression. Other people think it's a source of, a method of cleaning up our communities.
Have to live with every day in our community. So when you talk about all of this things that are happening in our community, and you look at climate change, and you look at issues that are now going to be coming up as the environmental justice movement move to identify the issues that were happening in our community, that many of our communities were still left behind. Many of our communities are still suffering today from the impacts of many of this industry that doesn't create the jobs that it says it's going to, that doesn't provide the education to our young people that it says it's going to, that doesn't allow our people to come out of much of the poverty that they live in. I think that, as grassroots people, we need to have the opportunity to be sitting at those tables where many of these decisions are being made, and many of these alternatives that as community people we have, as Dylan shared. I mean, will we be able to get this to the tables that we need for our voices to be able to be heard? Will we be able to share the knowledge that has been, placed upon Dylan to be able to come to those meetings and represent many of our people in our communities at those tables where climate change is now being discussed? What does climate change mean to us in our communities? What does it mean to the people in Savannah? What does it mean to the people in Idaho or around California, or many of these facilities where many of these technologies or things are going to be discussed? We're talking about nuclear energy. Where's that going to be coming from? We will never be able to affect change, and climate change will be determined, as it always has been in this country, by those that have the power to determine what climate change really means. And I think it is time that we be able to place our young people and the people that have the knowledge and the alternatives, whether that's wind or whatever it may be in our communities, to be able to be there and make sure that we're having the impacts that we need to have.